They find the first print almost by accident. A Viet Cong scout is moving along the edge of a low spur, eyes half on the ground, half on the trees ahead. The morning air is already heavy. Sweat runs down his spine under his faded shirt. He stops when something feels wrong. The ground looks like any other patch of red earth, littered with leaves and twigs, but one leaf sits at the wrong angle. Its underside shows pale, freshly turned by something that brushed past it. He kneels, brushes very gently aside a few crumbs of dirt. There it is. Half a heel mark, deep enough that a man carrying weight made it, long enough to be a boot, not a sandal. The edges are still moist. He looks around. There are no more prints, no obvious trail, just that one caught where the ground pinched in beside a root. He feels a prickle at the back of his neck. He waves the platoon commander over. Men gather silently, weapons low, eyes high. Foreign, the scout says. Not Americans, not big enough, not clumsy enough. The commander studies the mark. He has seen sign like this before in Phước Tuy. Australians, SAS. Ghost soldiers in 4s and 6s who leave almost nothing, call artillery from nowhere, and vanish without a fight. He straightens, scanning the low ridge above. The jungle is dense here, a patch of thick bush between a creek line and a wider valley. Good high ground, good observation. He imagines where he would hide if he were one of them. He signals. The company spreads. Squads peel off, left and right. A security platoon starts to climb onto the spur, moving slowly, guns up. Two men with better eyes than most hang back, scanning not just the ground, but every fold, every shadow. The commander expects the Australians to be gone. They always are. You never find them. You only find where they were. But this time, something is different. The scouts reach the crest and freeze. 10 meters away, beyond a tangle of vine and leaf, something is not quite right. The ground is too smooth in a patch. A root has been cut back, but only slightly. A small, unnatural shadow runs along the base of a tree where sun should reach. The air feels thick with presence. The commander's mouth is suddenly dry. He realizes, with a small jolt of something like fear and something like respect, that this time the Australians may not have run. They may still be here, watching, from 10 meters away. This is the story of the patrol that refused to run, the SAS team that stayed inside the kill box even after the enemy knew they were there, and somehow became invisible at 10 meters while hunted. The ground that holds them is neither deep jungle nor open field. It's the in-between country, the kind of terrain that doesn't look impressive on a map but matters in a campaign. Low, rolling spurs run down into shallow creek lines. The soil is red and slick when it rains, powder fine when it dries. A thin canopy of medium-height trees filters light into a green-gray haze. Underneath, scrub and secondary growth tangle into knots. Grass, vines, thorny bushes, saplings fighting for sun. There are clearer patches. Game trails, old footpaths, the faint line of a long-vanished cart trek. But most of it is thick enough that you cannot see more than 20 or 30 meters before the foliage folds the world around you. In the dry, dust hangs in the air where men move. In the wet, every touch leaves a darkening smear on bark and leaf. The air smells of earth, rot, smoke from distant cooking fires, and the bitter tang of cordite that seems to linger days after a contact. Sound travels strangely. A cough from 50 meters away might come to you as a whisper. A snapped twig at 10 meters can sound like a branch breaking right beside your ear. Birds call, argue, then fall silent for reasons you learn to weigh. a hawk, a snake, or men where they should not be. There is a plantation not far off, regular rows of rubber trees that look orderly from the air, but dissolve into confusion once you're under them. There are paddy fields down in the valley, glinting bright when the sun finds a hole in the canopy, and a sandy track where ox carts and military trucks alike pass, given the chance. This patch of ground sits astride a pattern of movement. Viet Cong units move through here to reach the Long Hai area or to slip north toward the main Allied bases. Couriers, local force companies, main force battalions, they all thread through these spurs and creeks, staying just far enough from the big roads to feel safe. It is close enough to Nui Dat that artillery can reach it in a minute or two. It is far enough that the enemy believes he can still own the shadows. To an infantry company, this is Zone X, a place to sweep, clear, then leave. To a 6-man SAS patrol, this is a living map. Ridges that offer lines of sight, creek beds that muffle footsteps, thickets that welcome hides. It is a character with moods. Dry, brittle, full of noise and dust. Wet, heavy, leech-infested, swallowing sound and footprint alike. It has seen many patrols come and go. Today, it will see what happens when one refuses to go, even after the enemy is on top of them.
Response is equally clear. Fight out with support, or, if impossible, call for rescue with larger forces. Helicopters, tanks, fresh companies punching corridors, fire and movement. Everything about main force doctrine assumes that when you are heavily outnumbered and surrounded, survival depends on either breaking free or being reinforced. Australian battalion operations reflect this. They patrol into areas like this, but they do it in strength. Platoons spreading in extended formation, company HQs with radio nets humming, artillery standing ready behind them, armored carriers or tanks nearby if terrain allows. When they find a large enemy force, they do not stay as 6 men and hope. They either bring the rest in or they leave. The SAS does not fight like this. Long-range reconnaissance doctrine is built around a different set of assumptions. A patrol is small, 4 to 6 men. No spare bodies, no one to flank the enemy with. No heavy weapons beyond what you can carry in your hands and on your back. Machine guns, a few claymores, grenades, maybe a light M79. Their power lies in stealth, not in their guns. Standard procedure says, if compromised early, break contact and extract. The patrol is too valuable to risk in a stand-up fight it cannot win. It can always come back later, from another angle. But procedure is only a guide. On some missions, the patrol is sitting on information that cannot wait. Perhaps they have eyes on a regimental headquarters. Perhaps they have just found a base area that has eluded everyone. Perhaps they have evidence that a major attack is forming, and leaving now would mean losing sight of it at the critical moment. Then the calculus changes. Run and you live, but you take your knowledge with you, and no one can act on what you haven't finished observing. Stay, and you might die, but you might also hand your task force a chance to crush something big. Most units do not get that choice at the patrol level. This SAS team does. When the enemy begins to close, when the first signs of encirclement appear in the pattern of sound and movement around them, their training says exfil. Their mission and their commander's judgment say something else. Stay. Disappear in place. Become invisible at 10 meters. And keep watching. In most armies, compromise means withdraw. If an infantry platoon's position is discovered by a larger enemy force, the drill is simple. Break contact. Fall back on prearranged lines. Let artillery and mortars cover your movement. If a company is encircled,
The men lying in that shallow leaf-lined scrape are the product of a particular culture. The Australian Special Air Service Regiment was built long before this patrol stepped off. Its roots go back to the British SAS of the Second World War, but its character is forged in Australian conditions, in bush, jungle, and mountain. Selection strips away those who cannot stay calm when alone, wet, underfed, and unsure of what waits over the next ridge. Induction in the late 1960s is blunt. You will often be the only Australians for kilometers in any direction. If something goes wrong, you will not call a company to help you. You will help yourselves, or you will die. Training drills in Doctrine in layers. First, the basics of small unit movement and fieldcraft, walking silently, lying still, reading ground, understanding how sound travels at night. Then, the specific skills of SAS Reconnaissance, building hides that can survive days of observation, constructing ambushes that kill decisively in seconds, navigating without obvious features, under canopy, under stress, managing radios, the lifeline to guns and to Nuidat. Doctrinally, the heart of an SAS patrol is not its firepower, it is its calm brain. The patrol commander must be able to weigh mission versus survival constantly. The signaler must be able to pass clear, concise information under pressure without flooding the net. The tracker or scout must be able to read sign at a glance, even when tired, even when afraid. The regiment lives by a few quiet rules. Never underestimate the enemy's eyes. Assume you are always being watched once you are within his zones. Do not fight unless you must. Your value is what you know, not who you kill. At the same time, they are taught something else. Plans break. At some point in your career, you will be compromised in a way no exercise ever fully prepared you for. Surrounded, tracked, cut off from extraction routes. When that happens, Doctrine gives you options: immediate extraction, fighting withdrawal, emergency pickup. But it also gives you a principle. Panic is the real encirclement. If you let fear dictate your move, you will run into something worse than what is in front of you. The patrol in this story is not made of heroes as films imagine them. They are professionals with training that has, again and again, put them into bad positions in controlled conditions and asked, "What do you do now?" Years of that training come to bear on one decision. Enemy all around. Do we run, or do we sink even deeper into the ground and wait?
You feel it before you can name it. A change in the air, in the forest's tone. You lie belly down in the scrape, body pressed into damp earth. Leaves and light brush cover the shallow dish where 6 men make themselves smaller than the ground that holds them. Your rifle rests along the berm in front, its muzzle just inside the shadow of the foliage. Through the thin line you've cleared, you can see the track down in the valley and a section of the opposite slope. This position has been good to you. For 2 days, you've watched a pattern grow. Small groups of armed men, couriers, a company strength movement at dusk, an officers' group yesterday afternoon that stopped to confer under a particular tree, unaware that eyes 100 meters away marked every gesture. You've sent short, coded reports. Someone at Nui Dot now knows there is more here than patrols, knows there is a bigger unit forming, using this area as a staging point. Now, something is different. It starts with birds. They fall silent along the high spur behind and to your left. Not all at once. First one, then another, leaving a knot of quiet where you know there should be sound. You feel a faint tremor through the ground, the soft thump of many feet, masked by scrub, but still there under your ribs. The patrol commander lies a meter from you. He raises 2 fingers. Listen. You listen. There. A voice. Low. Too low to catch the words, but the cadence is military. A brief rasp of metal, a weapon or a canteen bumping rock. Then another sound, closer. The whisper of leaves moving against cloth. Not wind. You realize the enemy is not just on the track below or the opposite slope. They are on your ridge. You ease your eyes sideways. Through a tiny gap in the foliage to your flank, you see movement. A dark shape slipping between trees, less than 20 meters away. Head turning slowly, weapon angled ahead. A scout. Another follows, slightly lower on the slope. Behind them shadows where more men are spread in a shallow arc. They are not walking through your area. They are searching. You feel your pulse in your throat. The rear guard, lying behind and above you, shifts his hand once, very slightly. The signal passes forward, a chain of touches on wrists and ankles. Everyone knows. You are being hunted. The first instinct, drilled into every soldier, is to move. Get out. Break contact. But you also know what lies behind you. Mind approaches, open patches where movement will be suicidal. You know how many enemy you've seen these past days. You know you are 6 against the web that could close on you from 3 sides. The patrol commander reaches over and taps the back of your hand twice. It is not the signal to prepare to run. It is the quiet order to sink lower, to become the ground. You let your muscles melt into the earth. Your breath slows deliberately, even as your heart races. Your face presses so close to the soil you can smell the iron in it. 10 meters away, the first enemy scout stops. He scans the slope. If he takes 3 more steps, he will be almost on top of your hide. You taste dirt and old leaves. An ant walks across your lip. You do not move. You are still alive. The decision has been made. You are not leaving. You are going to disappear in place, surrounded, and hope that skill and luck will be enough.
To understand why this patrol refuses to run, you have to go back to the days before the noose tightens. Task Force Intelligence has been watching a worrying trend. Contacts, prisoner interrogations, and local reports all suggest that a main force Viet Cong battalion has been using this particular patch of ground as an assembly and rest area before moving toward key targets, perhaps artillery bases, perhaps district towns. But no one has pinpointed where. Battalions can vanish into the folds of the terrain. A day after a major movement, a search by infantry might find only cold fire pits and trampled grass. Nui Dat wants more than rumors. They want confirmation, strength, routes, timing. An SAS patrol is tasked. Reconnoiter grid, determine presence and strength of enemy main force elements. Observe movement and report. Avoid contact. Remain in AO as long as required to gain pattern. 6 men insert at night. The helicopter sets them down in a small clearing 8 kilometers from the suspected area, and they walk the rest. Day 1, they move carefully into position. They find a knoll that lets them see down onto a key track
and across to a tree line where they suspect a larger camp might sit just out of sight behind a low rise. They dig, cut, shape. By afternoon, they are in. The first day they see only thin traffic. A couple of small groups with muskets and old rifles, local forces perhaps, or security for the area. A man with a bicycle laden with rice. 2 messengers moving fast, heads down. At dusk, a larger group appears, a platoon at least. They file along the track, crossing a shallow creek, then disappear into the tree line you can't quite see into. Through small gaps, the patrol spots what might be the edge of a more permanent position, a flash of a tent corner, the glint of metal stacked, men moving with the entitled weariness of those who live here, not just pass through. Reports go out in short bursts. Enemy platoon strength moving north to south, entering suspected base. Possible mortar base plates observed on pack frames. Multiple movements through same grid, area likely assembly point. By the end of day 2, a picture forms. Company-sized elements move in and out. At least 100 men are using this area, rotating through. Night sounds reveal more. Quiet commands, distant weapon cleaning, the creak of hammocks in trees. This is not just a transit lane, it is a staging area. The patrol commander knows what that means. Somewhere inside that grid, an attack is being prepared. On whom, they do not yet know. But if they can stay, if they can keep watching, they might catch the battalion massing, might give Task Force HQ the chance to hit it before it moves. On the morning of day 3, he sends a message up the net. Strong enemy activity confirmed. Recommend continued surveillance. Patrol prepared to extend stay if necessary. The response from Nui Dat is a single word. Acknowledged. The implication is clear. Stay as long as you can. Give us everything. That afternoon, the first signs of encirclement begin, and the patrol understands that leaving now would mean losing sight at the very moment their information matters most.
When you are 6 men lying under foliage with a company fanning out around you, the sound you do not make is as important as the shots you could fire. Fire discipline in normal SAS operations means holding your fire on tempting targets, letting patrols pass, ignoring easy ambush opportunities so that your presence remains unknown. In this situation, it becomes something harsher. Men are now within grenade range. You can hear them breathing. One clears his throat. Another mutters a curse as a thorn snags his uniform. Boots crunch faintly on twigs you all avoided when you crawled in. Every instinct screams to switch from prey back to predator, to detonate the claymore you placed as a last-ditch measure covering the approaches, to cut down the nearest shapes with a full magazine of 5.56, to fight in the only way you know the infantry back at Nui Dat will understand, loudly. But that is a fight you will almost certainly lose. Your perimeter will be marked in muzzle flashes and grenades. Their platoons will close from 3 sides. Mortars from the base area you've been watching will drop into this fold of ground. 6 riflemen against that is not courage. It is waste. So the patrol commander's orders, whispered in brief, calm words along the line, are simple. No one fires. No one moves, not unless they are on top of us. You lie there with your finger outside the trigger guard, not inside. Your cheek rests against the stock of your rifle, not quite hard enough to nudge it. You watch through slits in leaves as a pair of enemy soldiers pass less than 10 meters away, scanning downhill, not uphill. One pauses, looks toward your general direction. You taste the edge of terror. If he takes 2 more steps and glances down, he will see the faint outline of a man-shaped shadow under the brush, the unnatural line of a gun barrel, the cut edge of a camouflage net.
You do not lower your gaze. Do not blink any more than a slow natural interval. Fire discipline now means disciplining not just your trigger finger, but every muscle in your body. For minutes that feel like hours, you exist in a kind of suspended state. The world is reduced to inches, the ant on your hand, the bead of sweat sliding down your neck, the slight quiver in your calf that you fight to still. Around you, the enemy continues to hunt. Once, a man steps so close that his boot brushes the branch lying across your firing slit. He grunts quietly, adjusts his footing, then moves on. You do not fire. You do not flinch. Later, when you replay this in your head, that absence, the shot not taken, will feel like the hardest action of the whole patrol. Because courage in this moment is not rushing forward. It is waiting, weapon ready, knowing that if you are found, all hell will break loose, and still refusing to break the silence before you absolutely must.
The encirclement is not chaos. The Viet Cong commander is not a fool. He knows that if Australians are in the area, they are likely to be on or near good observation ground. He pushes a company up onto the high ground, sets search lines, and establishes blocking positions down by the creek and along the lower slopes. He is not just hunting, he is also preparing to kill whatever he flushes. The SAS patrol, sunk into the knoll, feels the ring close, but also notices something else. The way the enemy is moving creates its own pattern. Certain hollows are left unsearched. Certain angles create blind spots between the overlapping arcs of patrols. The patrol commander, lying with his face in the dirt, maps it in his mind. If they move now, they will run into a search line. If they move later, after the first sweep passes and fatigue sets in among the enemy, they might find a gap. But there is another problem. Down in the bowl they've been watching, more men are gathering. The battalion they were sent to confirm appears to be forming up for movement. Columns tighten, packs are stacked, weapons are checked. If the SAS leave now, they will live, but they will have lost the chance to track where that battalion is heading. He makes a decision. They will stay through the sweep, endure the search, and only then, if still alive and unseen, will they attempt to move, not away from the battalion, but with it, shadowing its movement out of the area. To do that, they will need to create space. So, paradoxically, they set an ambush behind them. In a small gully off to one side of their main hide, where a natural funnel forces movement between two boulders, they lay a single claymore mine hastily, wire trailing back toward a secondary fire position under a fallen log. It is not meant for the main body of the battalion. It is meant for the most dangerous enemy, the tracker or small party who might find their trail if they have to move. The ambush is not about kills. It is about buying a gap in the search pattern. They wait. The main search line passes over and around them, men cursing softly as they claw through brush and slide on damp soil. Hours later, as the day leans toward afternoon, the pressure on their ridge seems to ease. They can hear more distant voices now, shaping the battalion below into march formations. Then, to their rear, the sound they've been expecting. A smaller movement, less noisy, more careful. A tracker team. Weapons held differently, steps measured, voices fewer and lower. They're not coming straight at the hide. They're working along a faint game trail that leads toward the gully they trapped. The patrol commander signals. Two men ease, millimeter by millimeter, into the secondary position near the clacker. The rest stay frozen. Through a narrow gap, you see them. 4, maybe 5 enemy soldiers, spaced with professional caution, heads down looking for broken leaves, scuffed earth, nothing more. They step between the boulders, one by one, eyes on the ground. When the last man's shoulder passes the invisible line of the Claymore's killing arc, the commander squeezes. The explosion is savage in the confined space. Dust, rock fragments, iron balls from the mine turn the gully into a blender. Shouts, cut short, an instinctive, wild burst of fire from a wounded man's rifle. Then, silence. The patrol does not fire a single follow-up shot. They do not move. They let the shock of the sudden blast hold the enemy's attention in that one pocket of ground. Up on the higher slopes, furious voices echo. Men are sent rushing toward the gully, guns out. For 10, 15 minutes, the focus of the hunt is there. Not on the knoll. Not on the 6 men lying face down in the soil, who have just removed the eyes most likely to see them when they eventually move. The ambush is over almost before the sound fades. Its purpose was not to bloody the battalion. It was to cut away the fingers that might have brushed aside the last leaves hiding the SAS patrol when it finally slides out of the net. By late afternoon, the pattern shifts again. The first sweep has tired the Viet Cong company. They have turned over an empty hide or two, an old OP site perhaps, some sign of Australians having been in the area days before. They have lost a tracker team in that Claymore-shredded gully. They have found fragments of wire, bits of ration tins, impressions where bodies once lay. They know, now beyond doubt, that a foreign patrol has been here. What they do not know is whether it is still here. Below, the battalion begins to move. From their tiny, stifling hide, the SAS patrol sees it. Company-sized elements forming up on the track. Lines of men filtering out of the tree line into column. The patrol commander's mission focus reasserts itself. They came to confirm battalion presence. They are now in a position to do more, to track this battalion as it leaves, to determine its axis of advance and potentially its target. Extraction now would save the patrol, but it would leave the task force with only a partial picture. He takes a risk that few will ever hear about. He decides to stay on the enemy's route. As the light fades, under cover of the noise and confusion of an entire unit stepping off, the patrol moves for the first time in hours. Centimeter by centimeter, they slide backward out of the main hide, becoming again 6 separate men instead of a single organism in the ground. They move like wounded animals, slow, stiff, every joint protesting, but their minds are clear. They drop off the knoll's forward face, down into a shallow, scrub-filled dip that parallels the track below by 100 meters. Here, the terrain is just messy enough to hide them, just open enough that they can keep glimpses of the moving columns through gaps in the foliage. They begin what might be the most dangerous phase of the mission, shadowing a battalion while elements of that very battalion believe they have just flushed them from the area. All the way through the early night, they pace the enemy, using short, controlled bounds, resting behind earth banks while companies march past, then moving again to regain their position abeam the column. The temptation to break off and call for pickup gnaws at everyone. No one says it. They know how thin their margin is. Lose track of where the flanks are, and they could walk straight into a rear security element. Fall too far back, and they will lose meaningful contact. Towards midnight, the column halts in a new area of scrub and forest. Voices rise. Small fires glow briefly before being doused. Men fan out into defensive positions. From a fold in the ground 200 meters away, the SAS patrol sinks once more into a hasty, shallow hide. They are still in the zone, still inside the ring. On the radio, in a brief, carefully coded burst, the patrol commander updates Nui Dot. Enemy battalion departing previous AO. Heading, grid. Estimate, strength, halting now in new location. Back at Task Force HQ, staff officers trace the line on a map. They see, emerging, the outline of a potential attack route. Decisions begin to move that will send artillery programs, blocking forces, and perhaps even air into that path. All because 6 men chose not to run the moment the enemy realized they were in the area. They chose instead to become quieter, to push deeper into risk, and to walk out under the enemy's nose hours later. Their escape is not a dramatic helicopter under fire. It is a series of careful, night-bound steps away from the battalion once its new harbor is fixed. Across creek lines, through quieter pockets of bush, toward a distant pickup point where at first light the next day, a Huey drops in low, scoops them out, and is gone. Only then does the adrenaline drain. Only then do muscles start shaking. Only then do they have time to understand how close they came to being names on a memorial instead of silent lines in an after-action report.
From the Viet Cong commander's perspective, the operation is both a success and a failure. His battalion moves out on schedule. The area is swept. Signs of enemy reconnaissance are found. A tracker team is lost, but their sacrifice is folded into the usual accounting of war. His report, written perhaps in a cave later that week, will say something like, "Enemy small reconnaissance group detected in assembly area. Search operations conducted. Some traces found. Likely enemy withdrew under pressure." He believes the Australians ran. It is what he would have done in their place. He has no idea that while his men swept the higher ground, 6 Australians lay in the dirt under their boots, letting them pass. He does not know that after the Claymore killed his trackers, the same patrol walked alongside his battalion into the night, counting his companies. Only later, perhaps after an artillery ambush on another stretch of track or a blocking force appearing exactly where his column is headed, does suspicion begin to creep in. Captured documents in other operations show how Viet Cong cadres talk about SAS patrols. They describe them as very small, rarely more than 6 men. Difficult to detect, they move like our own guerrillas. A danger not for their direct fire, but because they guide artillery. Rumors grow in the ranks of patrols that lay invisible while search lines passed within arm's length, of Australians who refuse to run when surrounded, choosing instead to become the jungle. For ordinary fighters, the details are blurry, but a sense takes hold. If the Australians have been reported in an area, it does not mean they have gone. They might still be there, watching, listening. The phrase, "the Australians were here," becomes a warning. Not just that someone has been spying, but that someone may still be. That uncertainty is a heavier burden than confirmed contact. You can fight a seen enemy. You can avoid an area just shelled. How do you adapt to a patrol that might refuse to run when you surround it? A patrol that might lie 10 meters from your boots and let you walk past, then call death onto you hours later from a radio hidden under its chest? That question gnaws at professional pride. For the Australian side, the psychological effect is different. Within the regiment, stories of this patrol, with names removed, details blurred for security, circulate. They become more than tales. They become a reminder that panic can be beaten, that a surrounded patrol with discipline and patience can sometimes do more than a safe one withdrawn early. Not every situation allows this. It worked here because of terrain, training, luck, and the commander's judgment. But the knowledge that it can be done changes how future patrols think about compromise. Surrounded does not always mean finished. Sometimes it means time to get very, very quiet.
On paper, What this patrol achieves is recorded in numbers and simple phrases. Patrol duration, around a week in the area, with 3 days under increasing enemy pressure. Enemy observed, company and battalion-sized groupings, multiple movements. Own casualties, none. Enemy casualties, small, from the destroyed tracker team in the gully. In battalion war diaries and task force logs, the patrol's reports are just lines among many. Quote, Patrol X observed enemy battalion Y moving along axis, end quote. Quote, Artillery engaged suspected route after SAS report, enemy casualties unknown, end quote. At the end of the tour, somewhere in a staff summary, someone might note, quote, SAS patrols contributed significantly to early warning of several main force movements, end quote. Their reconnaissance allowed artillery and infantry to be positioned to intercept, reducing friendly casualties and blunting enemy attacks. The specific incident, staying in zone under encirclement, might be mentioned in a sentence or two. Quote, On one occasion, a patrol remained in the AO after compromise and continued to report, evading a search by elements of a VC battalion, end quote. The raw numbers of SAS operations in Vietnam tell part of the story. Hundreds of patrols across Phước Tuy and beyond. Many thousands of hours spent in hides, OPs, and ambush positions. Enemy killed directly by SAS weapons counted in the hundreds. Enemy disrupted, diverted, or destroyed by SAS-directed artillery and operations, harder to count, but much larger. SAS casualties in Vietnam remain low compared to their exposure. A handful of men killed and wounded over years of operations, against a backdrop of constant proximity to enemy forces. Kill ratios look impressive on graphs, but that is not the most meaningful measure for stories like this. Better metrics might be number of enemy COI or BN movements detected early, number of friendly units warned or redirected based on SAS reports, number of times SAS patrols stayed long enough, even under threat, to give a full picture instead of a partial one. Those figures are scattered through reports, never neatly totaled. But behind each is a patrol like this one. 6 names, a mission, a decision made under heavy pressure. From the outside, you see only the calm language of after-action write-ups. Inside, it was a week of heat, fear, stillness, and the strange deliberate choice to not take the obvious chance to leave. When the helicopter finally comes, it is almost anticlimactic. The LZ is a scraped patch of ground in secondary growth, chosen for its cover and its distance from likely enemy routes. The 6 men are there before dawn, stiff and hollow-eyed, faces streaked with dirt and dried sweat. They hear the Huey before they see it, the distant chop building into a rhythmic thump that seems too loud, too obvious after days of whispering and held breath. The bird drops in low, flaring over the trees, its crew chief scanning the perimeter with his weapon ready. The patrol climbs aboard in seconds, packs slamming onto the deck, bodies following. No one says much over the engine noise. Back at Nui Dat, they unload. Weapons are cleaned. Radios are handed over. Initial debriefs begin almost at once, short, factual, focused on grids and strengths and timings. Only later, in the quiet of the troop lines, does the strain leak out. A hand that trembles slightly lighting a cigarette. A laugh that comes a little too loud at a minor joke. A silence that stretches when someone mentions how close those boots were. The human cost of refusal is subtle. Physically, they are in better shape than after some jungle patrols. No ulcers, fewer leeches, fewer days on the ground. Mentally, the load was heavier. For hours, they lived in a state where one twitch could mean contact with an entire company. For a long, thick slice of time, they were ready to die. Not in a blaze, but in a brief, brutal burst if someone's eye caught the line of a gun barrel. That kind of stress leaves marks. SAS training selects for men who can carry it, but selection does not make them immune. They cope in different ways. Some talk it through with their patrol mates, replaying minor details until they feel they've pinned the fear down, mapped it like a track. Others put it in a box and move on to the next mission, letting time scuff the edges. The trust forged in those hours cannot be faked. You now know, in the most literal sense, who can stay still when the enemy is close enough to smell, who can keep his finger off the trigger when everything in him wants to fire, who can put mission above self, not on a slogan, but in a quiet decision to stay in the zone when extraction seems like the sanest choice. On the other side, in the battalion that hunted them, men also carry memories. One remembers the sudden blast in the gully, friends torn apart by an unseen mine. Another recalls the eerie feeling of turning over a hide that felt warm, recent, but finding no bodies, no blood, only impressions where foreign soldiers must have lain hours before. These are not just statistics. They are the small, sharp pieces of experience that war leaves lodged in people. The patrol that refused to run did not just complete a mission, it altered how those 6 men would walk through the world afterwards, eyes always assessing, ears always half-tuned for a change in the pattern of sound. It also altered how their comrades thought about what was possible under pressure. Courage here was not a charge, it was a refusal to panic. A collective act of will shared by 6 men who trusted each other enough to stay very still in the worst place to be.
When the war ends and the bases are dismantled, the ground where this happened goes back to being anonymous. The knoll sinks under new growth. Leaves fill the scrape where 6 bodies once pressed themselves into the earth. The gully where the claymore tore apart a tracker team softens, stones slowly covered by soil and moss. The track in the valley becomes a farm path again, or it fades entirely. But in regimental memory, this patrol remains, not as a detailed open story. Too much of what SAS did stays behind layers of classification and habit, but as a pattern. A lesson passed quietly from older hands to new ones. There was a patrol once in Phước Tuy that got surrounded. Instead of bolting, they dug in deeper, let the whole show walk past 10 meters away, stayed in the zone and walked out behind a battalion. Remember that next time you feel like everything's closing in. For modern Special Forces operators in different wars and terrains, the principle holds. Small teams will always find themselves on the wrong side of the line, compromised, outnumbered, cut off from easy extraction. Technology changes. Thermal sights, UAVs, better comms. Human nerves do not. The story of the patrol that refused to run becomes part of a bigger narrative about psychological mastery under pressure. On the Vietnamese side, it fits another way. Veterans talk about the frustration of hunting ghosts, about finding sign without bodies, about realizing only later that the enemy may have stayed inside their cordon and still managed to slip away. The anonymity of such actions is part of their nature. There are no medals pinned in front of cameras for lying still under leaves, no big public ceremonies for not firing a shot. But in the quiet spaces where soldiers talk to each other, where instructors shape the next generation, stories like this carry more weight than many loud battles. They teach that sometimes the hardest thing is not to attack or escape, but to endure in place, to be a calm space inside someone else's storm. In the shadows of that nameless knoll, in the thick heat and the charged silence, a handful of Australian SAS troopers chose to stay when logic and fear both said go. They did it not to be immortal, but to finish a job. To keep eyes on an enemy formation long enough that others could strike it at the right time and place. In doing so, they showed that invisibility is not just camouflage and good hides. It is a state of mind, a refusal to let panic dictate your shape against the earth. In the long war of patrols and counter-patrols, that is a kind of courage the enemy rarely sees and rarely forgets when he realizes too late that the Australians were right there all along.